Leader of the Official Opposition.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je vais laisser le ministre de l'Éducation des moments pour trouver ces mots et je vais demander mon question au Premier ministre au niveau de l'éducation. Parce que nous autres, notre équipe, on croit dans la démocratie, on croit dans les droits et dans la Charte des droits, puis on croit dans la loi. So we know that before the courts is a question on the application of the Charter of Rights. New Brunswickers are looking for answers. They want to know, is this Premier planning to use the notwithstanding clause if the court decision doesn't go in his favour?
The Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you again to the official leader of the opposition. I appreciate your question. We believe on this side of the House that parents have a key fundamental role to play in the education of their children. They're fundamental partners with our teachers and with our education system. We need them fully engaged. We don't believe that parents beat their kids. We believe that parents are essentially good. And, that's how we move forward. It would be inappropriate to look future and presuppose what the court's going to decide on the current challenge that's before it, and speculate on what might happen in the future. I personally believe that we're in the right. We're on the right side of this question. We're on the right side of this issue, and that the court will rule in our favor, and we'll move forward based on that. Still, we believe in the role of parents. Thank you very much.
Can the minister please reassure New Brunswickers that he will not use the notwithstanding clause?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, as in many cases, we don't deal with hypothetical situations in this House, or I don't presuppose a decision that's in front of the courts now and what that might yield. However, Mr. Speaker, what is very clear, what is extremely clear, is that not only in this province, but across this country, parents want a role in their kids, especially at minor age, Mr. Speaker, below 16. And, Mr. Speaker, there's no debate on that. That is clear. There's been lots of studies, lots of polls that say that. So I'm a little bit dismayed that the Leader of the Opposition basically doesn't want to answer that basic question, Mr. Speaker, whether she supports the role of parents or not. Well, it's clear. We support the role of parents, and we're going to find a bridge and a reality here that works for teachers, works for parents, and works for students, Mr. Speaker, because not doing that is letting down the very fabric that has built our society around solid families that work together for the best interests of their kids. That is the basis of what we have here in Canada and in New Brunswick, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll take a moment to praise a portion of the speech from the throne that talked about the reduction in ER visits that they delivered thanks to the mental health access over the phone. That was encouraging progress to see, because I spend a lot of time thinking about mental health for our young people and in schools. It's top of mind right now because of what students are going through, some of which we've talked about today. And we know that there is a desperate shortage of school psychologists. Those vacancies persist. Students cannot access the mental health supports they need. I'd like to hear from the Minister of Education if he could confirm how many vacancies are currently in place, how many students are waiting for mental health supports, and what plan is in place to improve mental health support for our young people in schools.
Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you again to the Leader of the Opposition for the question. The mental health of our students is extremely important. We take it very serious. And we know that coming out of the pandemic in society at large and also in our schools, people are having to relearn how to interact with each other in a respectful way. So schools are a reflection of what's going on in society. We do have a robust program in our schools where we help our young people deal with their mental health issues, whether it be taking them to work with mental health professionals, taking them to outpatients at the ER so that they can meet with someone that's more qualified than what we have in our schools, our guidance counselors. It's true that we have a shortage of school psychologists in New Brunswick. We continue to try and recruit for that, although we do have a plan for some testing that resource and methods teachers can do.
Thank you, Minister. Accepte l'opposition officielle.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Le coût de la vie, c'est quelque chose qui est un enjeu à chaque jour pour les Néo-Brunswickois. The cost of living is really wearing on New Brunswickers right now. People are cutting back on the joy in their lives in order to make ends meet. And we know that people with prescriptions are feeling the pinch with medication costs rising. People who are trying to feed growing kids are now afraid to make a trip to the grocery store. It has become abundantly clear that the clean fuel standard has not affected mom and pop shops nor the industrial producer behavior it was designed to affect. Yet New Brunswick gas prices are higher than most every other province in the country. New Brunswickers are fed up and they want answers. Will the Premier reverse his fuel adjuster and save New Brunswickers 7 cents a litre immediately?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I'm really glad to hear that. Let's go back to the root cause, Mr. Speaker, of a carbon tax that exists in our province, a carbon tax, and then the clean fuel standards that's having about 20% a litre. Mr. Speaker, the root cause is federal policies. You can't fix federal policies that are having an impact on every household, every commodity, every time to the grocery store. And on the clean fuels that we like to talk about, made in New Brunswick policy, it's actually at 4 cents, by the way. But so did Nova Scotia, so did PEI, and so did Newfoundland. So why did they have the same impact? Because we have regulated prices. The other provinces don't have regulated prices. Maybe we should understand what are the pros and cons of all that. But let's put the facts on the table, Mr. Speaker. Every province, Atlantic Canada, with regulated prices experienced the same thing when the Clean Fuel Standards Act came into being. So put it all out there. The bottom line, federal policies are putting our province in trouble. They're putting our people in a situation where they can't afford to live, and we're trying to put Band-Aids. Let's go back to the root cause in Ottawa and the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Accepte l'opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's interesting that a federal policy that affects all provinces is singled out here when New Brunswickers pay more in gas than any other place. You say it's 4 cents more because we have regulated prices. What is this Premier going to do to remove that 4 cents and make gas more affordable for New Brunswickers?
Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I can't do it unilaterally, but the people across this country can, and that is get rid of Prime Minister Trudeau. That is the only answer to this. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition supports the Trudeau policy, supports the high cost of living in this province, and wants a Band-Aid solution. Mr. Speaker, let's look seriously at the pros and cons. And Mr. Speaker, talking about how we can improve and help the economy, over in Europe when I was there, they said they're dismayed that no one is helping. No one is helping them in reducing their energy supply demands from Russia. And Mr. Speaker, but we'll give Ukraine $600 million. That's great. But we're not giving them any energy to offset buying power from Russia and buying energy, crude or gas, Mr. Speaker. So on the one hand, we fund the war to help Ukraine. On the other hand, we fund the war to help Russia. So what's our philosophy, Mr. Speaker? We live in a bubble. We live in a bubble, and our current emission standards here, we are 1.5% of world emissions. We could be a major player in reducing emissions, Mr. Speaker. Look beyond our borders and have a government in the federal government that looks that way, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Accepte l'opposition.
It's really disappointing to hear the Premier escape blame on this and say he can't do anything when he has the power to save New Brunswickers 4 cents a litre on gas today, and he's choosing not to because he wants to blame Ottawa. You have the power to make a difference, and you're choosing not to and holding up your hands and pointing at someone else when you're the leader of this province and you could make life more affordable for New Brunswickers. Our team has proposed to save New Brunswickers money. You take the provincial tax off their electricity bills. That would make a difference immediately for the New Brunswickers that are thinking about the heat that they need. Will you take action on affordability by reducing the cost of gas, reducing the cost of electricity, and delivering on the measures that were proposed a month ago, that we haven't heard anything about, that we didn't see anything in the speech from the throne about? Please give New Brunswickers the answers they need. Tell them how you are going to make life more affordable by accepting our proposal to make electricity more affordable and to make gas more affordable. Today, Mr. Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I only wish the Leader of the Opposition would make that same passionate plea to her leader federally and say, would you please develop policies that don't negatively impact rural communities and Atlantic Canada disproportionately? The same position, Mr. Speaker, that our federal colleagues, the MPs in this province and in Atlantic Canada, went forward and said, this is disproportionately hurting Atlantic Canada. Now, maybe she didn't get the memo on that, Mr. Speaker, but I'm sure they'd like her voice added to it. Let's get to the real problem, Mr. Speaker. And yes, we'll look at temporary measures, but, Mr. Speaker, they're temporary measures. The issue is the fundamental philosophy of the federal government is flawed. We need to fix our energy crisis. We don't need to put it on the backs of New Brunswickers and Atlantic Canadians, and we can be major players in reduction of emissions. So, Mr. Speaker, let's look at the big picture. Let's look at the big solution and not nickel and dime. Firstly, go after the federal government and say we need a federal policy that works. Talk to your federal MLPs that are your colleagues.
Chef de l'Opposition officielle.
Mr. Speaker, I'm still frustrated by the shirking of responsibility that's just been described over there. With the tools in his hands to make life more affordable, this government is choosing not to. That's not the answer that New Brunswickers want to hear. The Premier continues to be indecisive about whether to call an election. He put the election wheels in motion and then got cold feet. Tried to convince caucus, but now the 6 or the 5 seem to have won the day. And in the meantime, Elections New Brunswick has done their best to keep up with the Premier's on-again, off-again mood swings, and they've readied. They've booked halls. They've held training sessions. I'm wondering what his indecision and what this instability has cost New Brunswickers. I'm wondering if the Premier can confirm for us how much Elections NB has spent. Combien d'argent est-ce que l'élection Nouveau-Brunswick a dépensé, préparé pour une élection qui ne semble pas venir? What has this cost New Brunswickers?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the only real comment I can make is that the Leader of the Opposition should stay ready for election, Mr. Speaker, because there is no call down to preparations for this, Mr. Speaker. We are going to continue, and the only issue, Mr. Speaker, is that we don't want to lose the momentum in this province, because, Mr. Speaker, there are so many things that are outlined, as you saw in this throne speech, that is the building block and foundational building block that is certainly driven by a population increase like never before, like the private sector like never before, like engagement from the civil service in delivering results like never before, Mr. Speaker. And the last thing, the absolute last thing we can take a chance on is handing this over to people that just don't have a philosophy on a long-term view, but only a short-term gain. So, Mr. Speaker, our philosophy from the beginning is how do we make a difference right across the board, and how do we continue the momentum, Mr. Speaker? So we will continue. We will continue to be on the road, looking at options and whether we need to have an election or not. And, Mr. Speaker, I know I have my own challenges here internally, but we will stay up.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. It's a fairly simple question, and it's dollars and cents, which I know you love. So how much has Elections New Brunswick spent? Because I'm going to guesstimate hundreds of thousands of dollars that have been lined up to be wasted. New Brunswickers have run out of patience with the Premier's games, which he continues here today. New Brunswickers want answers and stability from their government. We have a speech from the throne that was a look in the rearview mirror, rehashing an announcement that we've heard a year ago and we've seen no progress on. The one that stands out the most to me is 380 affordable units that was in the speech from the throne in 2022, committed to be developed in 4 years. We saw the same promise in the same speech, 380 units in 4 years. Nothing has happened in the last year, and we have a speech from the throne that is not a vision for the future or a vision for the long term. Will the Premier confirm clearly, once and for all New Brunswickers, what is the date of the next election?
The Honourable Premier.
You know what? Mr. Speaker, the biggest concern that New Brunswickers would have, could have, should have would be handing the government over to this group across the hall, Mr. Speaker, because that's where the dollars disappear, that's where the taxes increase, and that's where the waste starts, Mr. Speaker. Absolute waste starts. And talking about the ideas in the throne speech, 73% of our commitments made in 20 are done, completed, Mr. Speaker. And the items that we're talking about, look at the schedule. Look at the schedule. The rent bank due January 1st, Mr. Speaker. That was the schedule from the beginning. You look through here and the number of nurses have been hired. 425 new nurses, Mr. Speaker. We're making progress in that way. We're reducing the number of travel nurses, Mr. Speaker, because we're gaining in our employment stats in the health field. So, Mr. Speaker, when you look at actual results, the reason you do a recap is because you've got results to talk about. The reason that the Liberals never do a recap, because there's nothing to talk about. So, Mr. Speaker, the foundation is built. We're moving in directions in all categories. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.